Hi, I'm Vera.
And I'm Sloetti Spaghetti, and we like to go on cycling trips and have been doing so for over a dozen years.
In this video, we would like to share some of the memories we have on the first part of a trip we did in 2013.
If you saw our last video, you will recall that we did our first trip on a bicycle as a sort of trial run back in 2012. We cycled 400 kilometers from Geneva to the south of France and 400 back again, just to see if cycling long distances appealed to us.
Yes, and it did. So the following year we decided to make a longer trip, but we were wondering where to go.
Well, we did want to spend some time in the south of France again, skinny dipping in the Seine River and otherwise just lounging around in the afternoon heat.
But it wasn't going to make our journey any longer. So we had a long thought about where to head.
And then you came up with a great idea.
Yes, why not visit your grandmother and the town you were born?
It had been a while since I had seen her last and would be motivation to see the journey through and not give up halfway. The only thing was, that was over 1,000 kilometers away.
So off we were, following the Tour River from where we live in northeast Switzerland, just skimming the German border and then returning back to Switzerland on the left side of the Rhine, heading west.
This is the route we took crossing France to Calais. To go and hop on a ferry. Upon arrival in Dover, we'd cycle a short distance to our destination, Sevenoaks in Kent, also known as the Garden of England.
The plan was to stay there for a couple of days, turn around and cycle to the south of France, where good weather was almost guaranteed, and then to cycle up to Geneva and take the train back home. In total, we cycled 2,600 kilometers in 5 weeks with an additional 2 weeks resting.
Like in the last video, the pictures are fairly random, as we weren't on the lookout for any specific points of interest and just sort of picked up what we saw on the way and took photos when we had breaks.
However, as we progressed, we got more into taking photos.
You'll notice the absence of the trailer I dragged behind me on our first trip.
No, instead of that, we were carrying far too much weight in our panniers, but weren't concerned with that yet. Before crossing Basel, we stopped at the Roman ruins of Augusta Raurica and had a look around the amphitheatre.
As I once lived in Basel, I was well acquainted with the city, and we didn't bother to take any pictures or even stop for that matter. I also knew how to get there by bike, so it hadn't been a problem. Of course, getting to Calais was a different story. It hadn't been the first time I cross-countryed France from Basel to Calais, but I was an infant back in the seat of a Mini at the time, so it wasn't that I could have remembered. So I must admit that we still didn't have a smartphone at the time, and the vast network of voies vertes the French are currently committed on finalising was still in its early stages, so I couldn't rely on that for planning my route. So I bought a whole stack of detailed maps from the local bookshop, spread them all across the living room floor, and drew a straight line from Basel to Calais. With some help from Google Street View, I planned a detailed route, trying to avoid main roads, and was really excited to put that plan to action.
On our way, we discovered that there are many small country roads in France, without much traffic and that are usually in good condition. So the plan worked out really well. Although, we hadn't planned on getting a wet welcome when we crossed the border. The rain continued the following day. We took refuge in this church to dry out a bit before making it up the Ballon d'Alsace, a long winding path all the way up to 1,057 meters above sea level.
Unfortunately, we didn't take any pictures of the mountainous landscape and the fantastic views, as, being stuck in a cloud, there was not much to see. On the upside, there wasn't any traffic and especially no motorbikes to disturb the peace.
But not only was it wet, but also cold, and we were almost defeated by the time we made it to the top. Not looking forward to the descent and the additional cold from the wind chill effect. But thankfully we found a hostel on the summit with a warm bed, and we were served Alsatian stew for dinner.
This would have all been okay, but as we were unpacking to dry our clothes, I noticed I was missing my mobile phone. I slightly panicked, wondering where it had gone.
It turned out that you had left it at the campsite the previous night, whilst charging it, and I couldn't recharge my phone either because of that.
So I called the campsite from the hostel, and they were very kind and had found it and put it aside and offered to send it back home by post. So that was all sorted, but it left us without a phone.
Which, apart from not being able to contact your grandmother, so she knew when we were coming, wasn't really a big deal.
Feels like a lifetime, but it was only 11 years ago. My God, nowadays I could make a YouTube video about how I survived without a phone for 7 weeks on a bicycle in a foreign country, and it will go viral.
This is a small memorial in remembrance of René Potier, who won the Tour de France in 1906 and led the race as he passed by here at the summit in 1905, after climbing the grueling Ballon d'Alsace twice. So the same route we had just completed. Successful as he was, his life came to a tragic and rather unexpected end. After discovering his wife had been having an affair while he was away on the tour, he committed suicide by hanging himself on a bike hook a year later.
The rain had passed the following day, and we started out well rested and descended into the upper Moselle Valley, following an old railway line that had been converted to a cycle path which led us to this cycle path roundabout, not a very common design for cycling infrastructure. That was the last we would see of any cycling infrastructure until we arrived in Reims several days later. But traffic was calm as we rolled through the countryside.
At the Grand Spa of Contrexéville, a small town of 3,500 inhabitants.
Thanks to an underground fault that was once filled to the brim with mineralized water, the region has been famous since at least as far back as the Romans, as there is documentation of them bathing in the cold spring water to remedy health issues. Nestlé also bottles the water under the label Contrex, along with the water from the other close and internationally known spring in Vittel, and has been criticised in the past for overusing the source, depleting the groundwater and leaving residents in fear that their wells may dry up. Although you can't really blame Nestlé solely for this, as it was locals who started selling off water back at the end of the 19th century in the first place. And Nestlé's involvement dates back to the 1960s, and they were allocated the rights for what they used in 1990.
And in a recent settlement, they did agree to reduce the amount they use. But it is still questionable if carping water around half of Europe or to wherever it gets sold in the world is necessary and sustainable. And then it gets filled up in plastic bottles.
Yes, plastic bottles made out of oil. Something we often forget. I once saw a report on German TV where a representative of Nestlé was asked if using bottles made of glass wouldn't be more environmentally friendly. but he explained that the increased weight would mean that more carbon dioxide would be emitted during transportation. Whereas the reporter rightly pointed out that if the water wasn't transported as far, this claim wouldn't be valid. Then the representative of Nestlé continued by pointing out that plastic PET would get recycled, which is not entirely true, as it doesn't get turned into new bottles completely, and a good portion of it is just used in granulates or textiles, for example. In the end, it all disintegrates into microplastic and ends up in our brains, among many other places it shouldn't get. The hypocrisy was enhanced by the fact that large illegal deposits of unused plastic bottles were later found in the surrounding woods. Heavens knows what they were thinking.
What aggravates me, especially on cycling trips, is that one is forced to buy those bottles and isn't left with much other choice. Except for at home in Switzerland, where the tap water is excellent. Good drinking water isn't always easy to obtain, and tap water is often mixed with chlorine, which doesn't taste very good. Which is why we have a water filter, like this, and use that whenever possible.
The thing is, every time I hear something about Nestlé and their water dispute in Vittel, I always think to myself, oh yes, I cycled past there on my way to England, so it sort of sticks.
Yes, like I pointed out in the last video, you remember so much when you cycle.
I really like this snapshot. It's like when you were in school and were tasked with writing an essay and you got a photo to base your story on. This would have been one of those photos. The man on the bicycle carrying a rake. Is that his wife awaiting him on the chair at their doorstep? What led up to this scene? What happened afterwards? And what about the row of houses? For whom were they built? And were the people on this picture born there? So many questions. I like this photograph so much that I had it printed in black and white, framed it and hung it on my living room wall.
This is the Lake du Chantecoq, the lake of the crowing rooster, which is the water reservoir for Paris and the largest artificial lake in France. Its name there originates from a Celtic word for oak, and the cock-a-doodle-doo-bit was the name of one of the 3 villages that got flooded back in the day. We then turned north and followed the River Marne.
This is an aqueduct with a unique castle-like tower, marking the spot we left the Marne Valley and headed into the Champagne region, where champagne originates from.
Apart from the famous vineyards, the region is also famous for their escargots, French for snails, a French speciality.
Mansions and castles reflect the wealth generated by selling these exquisite products.
In the distance, you can see the capital of the Champagne, Reims, with its prominent cathedral.
There is a small river that runs through the city of 180,000 called the Vesle. The main waterway, however, is the canal that connects the Aisne and Marne rivers. We were looking forward to discovering the beautiful and historic city centre.
There was a lovely cycle path along the canal, and we passed many other cyclists and a large group which were apparently taking a break from their tour, happily waving and shouting, "Attention les punaises!"
Yes, I thought they were cheering us on, so I looked back, laughing, waving, much to their amusement, not really understanding what they were saying.
Well, we soon discovered that punaise means pins, and that their shouts were not in fact cheers, but rather a warning, as we looked down to see that our tyres had become all colourful. Some jerk had played a cruel joke on us.
And then I learnt my next lesson as I removed one of the pins, instantly deflating my front tyre. It would have been better to have left them stuck for the moment. Anyway, we ended up having 3 flat tyres, and with only 1 spare tube, we weren't going anywhere from here and wondered how we were going to solve this problem.
We asked all sorts of people if they knew if there was a mechanic nearby, but nobody could give us any directions.
And then 2 police officers passed by on bicycles, so we thought surely they would be able to give us some advice and help out 2 stranded tourists.
But they were just as clueless and recommended we go back to our car to collect the broken bikes.
Our laughter left them baffled as we explained that we didn't have a car and had cycled all the way from Switzerland.
And then some random guy appeared and gave us direction to the Decathlon, a large sports shop with an in-house mechanic that was only 5 minutes walk away.
Thankfully, they dropped everything and put us first in line.
But instead of taking time to enjoy the historic buildings, we spent all morning to get us sorted out. And with Grandma waiting, we didn't want to waste any further time and headed straight back to the canal to continue on our journey.
No campsites here in the area, so we set up camp at the Lac de l'Ailette and woke up before the swans who slept nearby.
This is the town of Laon, whose ancient diocese rises 100 meters above the otherwise flat Picardy plain and historically held strategic importance.
The headstone of an unidentified German soldier reminds us that we are now in the middle of the battlegrounds of the First and Second World War, and graveyards often dot the landscape, commemorating the sacrifices these young men made for the greater good of their ideologies. However, the glorification of past heroes hasn't stopped humanity conducting senseless wars since. With thoughts like that running through our minds, we decided to soldier on and see how many brick buildings we can count whilst we cross the Pas de Calais.
Calais, we actually made it. Time to get on the ferry to whisk us away to England. We were anxious about the whole procedure as it was the first time we had embarked on a large ship with our bicycles. But the French officials were really laid back and just said we should get in the line with the cars.
Upon boarding, we were kindly asked to put the bikes in a corner of the ferry's hull and we set off for sail. Well, sort of at least.
Welcome to Dover. England greeted us with sunny skies and a historic castle. But we got chased around the port by the officials, constantly getting reminded and screamed at to keep to the red line, meaning the line cyclists had to specifically follow that eventually led us out of the port grounds. We had been treated much better in France, but were happy to have arrived, keen to discover the sweet Kentish countryside.
Time for lunch at one of the lovely pubs along the way, giving us time to contemplate the last leg of our journey. Beautiful as the landscape was, we hadn't made much progress, which was getting us into a bit of a fix, as I had called Grandma from the campsite that morning, promising her to arrive that evening. Yet, we were still confident of making it in a reasonable time.
But little were we aware of the problems that awaited us. First off, the hills were very steep, slowing us down considerably.
And going downhill wasn't much better, as the surface of the roads was really rough, and we had to constantly swerve around potholes to avoid any accidents.
And then we got lost so many times. The map we had was useless, showing villages that didn't exist and not showing the villages that were signposted. At times it felt as we were going around in circles.
No time for taking any pictures under these circumstances, but instead we had to stop motorists to ask for the way.
Yes, one got out of his car, spread his map out on the bonnet and said, "I'm sorry, I'm just as lost as you are. I was just going to ask you for directions."
And another one gave us a list of pubs we could use as landmarks, which actually worked out pretty well.
Yes, this was definitely the most adventurous and difficult part of our journey. It was close to midnight and pitch dark by the time we arrived at your grandmother's.
Yes, she was worried sick, but ever so proud that we had actually made it from such a long way away on a bicycle.
It was difficult to recapture all the things we experienced and discovered on the way. And it left us just amazed by all the impressions we got and even just realizing how many towns, hills and valleys lay between us and home.
Not only had we seen a great many things on the way, but we also learnt a lot too. Foremost, that you need suitable tyres that offer good protection against punctures and provide grip on rough surfaces. Not that our tyres were bad, but the slicks we had were more suitable for quick commutes in a bicycle-friendly city. And yet, this was only the first part of our journey. We took 12 days to get this far and had another fortnight ahead of us, soon departing again for France and looking forward to smooth roads and once again actually finding the towns marked on the map.
It was really fun making this video and I hope you enjoyed it.
If you did, please hit the like and subscribe button.
And if you have any questions, please put them in the comment below.
So I hope you join us again in the next video of the second part of our journey. Until then,
thanks for watching and bye bye!